Hello everyone, welcome back. Tonight I'm going to go back to material design in XAML. There's been a couple issues flagged recently and would like to work on trying to get a faster cadence and some automation and some stuff cleaned up. So figured I would start there and we'll have some fun and see where it goes from there. Okay, so the first one I wanted to drop in on was this one that showed up earlier today. Now, this one kind of caught me off guard, and I think I don't remember if I streamed the work for this or not. One second. My light is very, very bright. Okay. Better. Now I'm not just completely whited out. Okay, so I had put in a little bit of code to support horizontal scroll inside of WPF. This is something that is not enabled by default, which can be a little bit obnoxious. Bilaxis, I'm probably butchering that name, I apologize, commented that using the Logitech MX Master 3 mouse with a horizontal scroll wheel, which is a pretty cool thing, ends up running into a problem here. And I had initially asked for feedback on what the W param was before I realized that it's right there in front of me. And this one actually took me a few minutes of staring at it before I figured out what the problem was. So if it's not obvious to people, let's walk through the report, because I think there's enough here in order to figure it out. So this is actually one of my favorite things to do in the world. Is I love when I am able to diagnose a problem without actually ever firing up a debugger, just from like exception stack traces and that kind of thing. So I love the mystery of it all. It's like a good like Sherlock Holmes novel. So what we know that it threw a system overflow exception, and we know that there was an arithmetic operation that resulted in an overflow. Great. Real quick, for people who may not be familiar with the concept of what an overflow is, quick demonstration. So, where'd he go? Come here, come back. So Windows Calculator. If you go over and set it into programmer mode, you get this pretty cool idea. So let's just imagine that we have a simple number. We're going to keep this at 255. So, and you'll note down here, it actually shows us the binary representation of 255. So for my purposes, we're just going to use the first 8 bits. This is pretty easy, right? If I turn this bit off, it subtracts it by 1 and goes down to 254. If I turn this bit off, it goes down by 2. If I turn this bit off, it goes down by 4. Not surprising, this bit goes down by 8. And you can start to see, and for people who may not be familiar with binary, that's effectively how this works. The first bit is worth 1, second one's 2, 4, 8, 16, etc., all the way up. So you just add up the number of bits that are on, and that's your decimal value, which is great. Overflow occurs when you run out of bits. And specifically when you run out of this issue of, if I only have 8 bits to work with, and I add 1 to this, and I go to, say, 256, you'll note I've now exceeded the number of bits. I'm now using 1 more bit than what I had. And mathematicians, they can always add 1 to anything. That's great. Computer scientists, we can't always add 1 to everything. We work with fixed number ranges. So we only have 8 bits to work with. In order to get to the number 256, we went over the top. And so this actually runs amok of that kind of overflow of, hey, I don't have enough bits left over for what you're trying to do. The interesting part, though, is if we look at this stack trace, it shows that right here, so this double alligator brace C double underscore, whenever you see something like this in a stack trace, look for something that's either a local function or a lambda. And the thing over here will tell you what function that lambda or local function is inside of. So in this case, we know that we're inside of on support horizontal change, and we are looking for some sort of lambda inside of there. And if we look down here, he was kind enough to include the external code, which I'm guessing means source link is working appropriately. And we can see here that, okay, if we find, where was it? We find on support horizontal change. Let's actually, we're going to jump here. we'll go into the actual source code rather than the decompiled source, just to make sure it looks right. So inside of here, we can see that we are going to be inside of one of these lambdas. And inside of here, we can see that there's only a couple things, and it gets a little confusing because we have a local function and multiple lambdas. So we've got a lambda here, local function invocation, lambda, right there and there. Great, great. And then inside of here, just to make things a little more confusing, what's up, Robert? Yep, more WPF. We have this local function registering for an event, which is another local function callback inside of here, which is then itself yet one more local function all the way to get us into here. Now we could go through and look at like the decompiled source to figure out which one of those local functions was double alligator brace C double underscore display class 18 underscore 1, or we could look at the next line of the stack trace and know, well, it has to be the one that contains a call to int pointer to int32. So we look in here, the only call to int32 is right there. So that kind of narrows down which of our local functions we're interested in. And we know that this guy caused an overflow. And you'll note this code here is slightly different than the code shown here. This looks like JetBrains' writer to me, and writer is helpfully showing you the decompiled source, which is a little bit more verbose than what may have originally been written. Decompilers always have to kind of guess to reverse engineer what the original code was there, because it's not a two-way street. So you can see here it is taking WPF and right shifting 16 bits, which lines up with what we have here. But then you'll note we've got some extra parens here that help make things a little more apparent in the code. We've got this little doohickey here that we're anding it against, and then we're casting it back to a short, and that gets then upcast into an int. So what this is effectively doing is an int32 is 32 bits wide. We're shifting to the left 16 bits, leaving us with only zeros in the upper 16 bits and values in the lower 16. Then we are anding them together to make sure that whatever was up there is trimmed off and we are just the size of a short. And then we upcast that short into an int. And this is where the problems come. So specifically what's biting us is this call to int32. We haven't even gotten to the rest of this mess yet. But what's happening, if we look at the screenshot, if we see this guy here, this value 0xFFE2000000. We can look at what would, so if we just cheat for a moment and go int w gets 0xFF E2 1 2 3 4. And you'll note we immediately get a compile error because it's acknowledging that this number is too big to be an int. That's kind of unfortunate. And the reason this happens is because of something called 2's complement. Complement binary. Probably should have found a reasonable explanation to 2's complement here. Blah, 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 blah. This one here is probably good enough. So here, let me move this. Let me bring Wikipedia over to the middle. So the idea with 2's complement, so we're gonna pretend like we're only playing with 3 bits here, just to keep the math simple. Is when you're working in binary numbers, computers speak ones and zeros. That's effectively what they know. And the problem is if you want to represent negative numbers, you have to have some way to indicate a minus sign, which is fine. The issue being that this minus sign here, if you just took one of your bits and said, okay, if that bit is a 1, it'll be a negative. If it's a 0, it'll be a positive. The issue there is then you end up wasting a little bit because then you have, with that representation, both a positive and a negative 0. With 2's complement, what we end up doing is a little bit of math in order to flip it so that there is only one representation of 0. So you'll note here with 3 bits, we're able to represent all of the numbers from 0 to 7, so 8 possible numbers here. And if we used one of these bits for a positive and a negative, we would then cut the number of values we were able to display in half, because one of those bits would be used for the negative sign. With 2's complement, we're actually still able to represent 7 numbers. It's just that we're going to give +1 negative values all the way down. So I won't bore people with the math behind it, but that is the rationale of how this works. Because of that, it means that there are certain values in binary, which is effectively what we're getting when we look at this thing in hex. You'll note the Windows calculator is actually rather nice. And actually, we can do this. FFE2. So let's just ignore the bottom bits because we really don't care about them. So pretend, and this will be a short, not an int. Should have the same problem. So if I go hex, I can type in FFE2. And we can see what all of these bits end up looking like. So with in binary, when you're displaying things in hex, every 2 digits of hex is 8 bits worth of binary. So we have 4 digits in hex, that is 16 bits in binary. And what we're trying to do is just shift these 16 bits over and only extract those parts out. And the problem is in our attempt to do that, this guy ends up throwing an exception. And we can see here, if we hover on this thing says overflow exception. It's like, oh, okay, let's take a quick look at what that is. We look down here, system overflow exception. On a 64-bit platform, the value of this instance is too large or too small to be represented as a 32-bit signed integer. So, unfortunately, in my testing, I never ran into this. But apparently, on some systems, this W param that comes in can exist as a number bigger than what can fit inside of a signed or a 2's complement binary number. So because of that, we need to appropriately handle that. And in this case, it's going to be simple. It's going to be, we're just going to use extra bits. I think that's the easiest. And actually, real quick, before we get too carried away, let's write a quick test. I think we can test this. I think this is I don't know where I'm going to put this, so I'm just going to put it here. Let's see. So this will be fact. Let's see. Public void test numbers. So we're gonna, because it's really hard to actually test a callback from a winproc function, rather than going to the effort of trying to hook this and do all of that stuff, we're just going to test this here. Okay, so first thing we need is an int pointer. PTR gets new int pointer. Will you let me initialize you with an int value? You'll let me initialize you with a long value. That'll work. 0xFFE21234L. So the L here allows us, if we leave the L off, the compiler wants to interpret this as it'll figure it out. Oh, it figured out that it was an unsigned integer. Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, and it ended up calling it a long. So that'll work. So even though I'm able to type this here, just be aware that this is now invoking the long overload. And it's when I hover on it, it is showing it as a uint32, so unsigned. Just calling back to the 2's complement. If you were to deal with, if binary is unsigned, it effectively means you ignore negative values, those don't exist, and you just do straight counting in binary. Unsigned is easy to work with. At least binary wise. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to do just this maneuver here. Right? So when that value comes through, we want ptr 2int32 blah 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 blah. We want so let's see, we expect tilt to be equal to 0 x ffe2. And to be clear, just because this is an int preceding zeros, right? So we can break this up like this, just to make that look a little easier, and then tilt. Right. So this is the test we expect to pass. And right now, I would expect this thing to get the same overflow exception. Sorry, I changed branches right before starting the stream, and so I'm almost assuredly in a situation where it is going to go crazy. Whoop, where'd my test window go? There you are. Come back. You, sit there. Sit there and be happy. Run the test. Run the test. Okay, so it ran the test. What did it run it under? I'd like to see the output. Okay, so system overflow exception. So perfect, problem replicated. I believe the simple fix here is we just convert this to an int64 and then everything should work. So we're going to shift it down 16 bits. We're going to still strip everything else off. And I think it works. But this is why we write a test. Because now when it tries to convert the pointer to a numeric value, it will end up with extra bits. Let's see. This is interesting. It's blowing up on the constructor before it even gets to me. What? You're telling me I can't instantiate something as big as what I'm being given? Love it. Love it. So that is epic. That is epic. You can't actually instantiate an int pointer with that value. Well then, that's exciting. So, unsafe. Let's see here. How do I get that into a void pointer? Let's see. Fixed void star. Foo gets. I don't think that quite works because in order to get a pointer to it, I have to get it onto the stack. So let's just bring you up real quick. Let's see. Object box gets. Think this works. That'll get me into there. What is your problem? Unsafe code may only appear if compiling with unsafe. Okay, you are quickly becoming a pain in the neck. What's the flag for unsafe? I would like to turn unsafe code on. Pretty please. Something about build. Boom. Turn on unsafe. As the name implies, it allows you to do unsafe things. Okay, so that fixes problem one. Can I just cast you? Okay, I can't remember. I do this so infrequently. C#, convert long to void pointer. Just want to, yes, type identifier, void identifier, blah, 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 blah. I just want to point you at a thing. Oh, address of, that's right. That's right. something more akin to that. Managed object type. Can I get away with that? Cannot take the address of a given expression. Grumble, 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 grumble. So var gets address of boxed to a managed type of, oh my word, because this expects a foo, and in this case foo is going to be a yeah. Oh wait, seriously? It's just simple box. Oh, this is putting it into oh, hey, look at that. That looks kind of like what I want. Unbox. Boxed. No way this bites me. Let's see. So take you out of a fixed statement. Sure. Okay. I guess we should probably go back and make sure we fail for the right reason. Type must be a pointer. Of course. Okay, this is quickly becoming very difficult to test. Okay, what were the other things that you did? So you'll accept a long, but you'll blow up on anything that's too big to be an int. It contained in a 64-bit signed integer. On a 32-bit phone, the value is too large. Is this test? I'm wondering if I force this down to here, if I can get away with this. I'm wondering if it's the artifact of my test runner. Yeah, okay. Test runner's now in 64-bit mode. Because I'm thinking the failure case is anytime that code was executed on a 64-bit system. Or let me rephrase. 64-bit system with somebody using horizontal scroll. Okay, now we're failing for the right reasons. Okay, so once you get your, okay, so the original code does work. Once you get your test runner out of 32-bit mode. Okay, so now the question comes, this guy here, we expected it to be that, and we ended up with very much not that, and I assume what we're running into is 2's complement issue again, because you'll note this goes down to a signed number. I might need to double check because I may just be wrong with my assertion here. Yeah, so this is minus 30, whereas the other one should have been, let me just check, because I think the original bug was when it was left. If I scroll left on any place, it won't be a problem, but if I scroll right even a little bit, trying to remember how this works, because I think on a scroll of right, the horizontal, so let's see, on a scroll of right it was crashing. Should right produce a negative value? Horizontal offset goes negative. That is correct, because a horizontal offset of negative would end up scrolling the content to the right. So that, I believe, is correct. Got it. Okay, so I think the simple solution here is this. We convert to an int64, and then we stop blowing up. And the problem goes away. So let's do this. Let's go in here. I'm wondering if I should, because I could break this little bit of math out somewhere else to handle it, but I don't think it's that big of an issue. I don't think it's that big of an issue. We're going to let her go. Okay, so let's come in here and let's do create branch. Okay, so issue number 2668. So I go fix 2668. Oh, wrong button. Fix 2668. And then we only want this change here, so that's a little tiny. Let's go a little smaller. There we go. So 32, 64. That's what we expect. The unsafe change to the test project, we do not want that. So fixing issue when, how about fixes, well, fix crash on 64-bit process. So that's actually something worth noting is right now, 64-bit operating systems are pretty much ubiquitous. You kind of have to work hard to get, sorry, once again, my colleagues seem to enjoy, I need to mute them. They often sit in the chat and then heckle me on side channels, which is great fun, and I enjoy it. Thank you, Bruce. So even though the 64-bit operating system is more or less ubiquitous, especially for WPF, like, I don't even know if there is a supported version of Windows that's 32-bit anymore. There might not be. However, your processes can still run 32-bit or x86. So the bitness of the operating system is not as important as whether your app is running 32 or 64-bit. So we saw that a little bit even with my test runner where it was failing until toggling the processor architecture for any CPU projects. When I left it at auto, it was falling into x86, not x64. And as soon as I flipped it to x64, then our code ended up working. So worth being aware of that. So I'm willing to bet this user was running under an app that was set at 64, or at least the app start. It could be any CPU and the app ran at 64-bit. Okay, so let's see. Fixes this because this will pick it up. And here we go. Okay, I want to try something too because I was shown something the other day. And I'm actually curious what Git Kraken does. So if I take this and I drag this down onto here, doesn't start a pull request. Wait, oh, push it and start pull request. That's exactly what I want. And then ask me where to push to, so go ahead and do my fork, sure. And then start a pull. Git Kraken. You impress me. You impressed me, Git Kraken. I approve. That was very easy. Okay. Send it. Can't get much easier than that. Okay, so let's leave a quick comment on the issue. Fix in tonight's nightly release. Comment. Okay, and then we're going to just slap this guy into the milestone. We'll let that guy run. And then let's check over here. So, because there's a couple PR. So there's an icon update. Great. Slap it in. Squash merge, done. So I honestly, I don't even check these anymore. They've been so consistent on doing it. What happened here? Image filter used to be tied to image multiple outline, and now it's tied to image auto adjust. Great. The material design icon people make changes constantly, which is why I have automated that process. Okay, so let's jump back here. Let's go find. Let's see, tab control. Let's see. First of all, thanks for creating an amazing toolkit. You're welcome. I just maintain it though. When using tab control with shadow assist step 2 in the tab control, a tab item that contains a scroll viewer and card, the card will appear in front of the tab control's header. I see. So if you have a card, it's going to float on top is the problem here. And so because the tab or the tab content floats on top, this is probably an easy one. When using a toolbar color zone with tab control, the same shadow issue will occur. This, however, can easily be fixed by adding panel z-index. This was discussed in issue 647. When using a tab control setting, a panel, using a tab control setting panel z-index on the tab control tab item content will not fix the issue. Tab item header and content in here. I think he is correct, though. Rather than setting the panel index for the z index of the panel, I usually prefer to just reorder the XAML where possible. Tends to make things a lot easier. So z index in WPF can be set in a number of ways. One is with this attached property if you want to explicitly control it. The other option is just reordering your XAML, because your z-index will just increment up for each element in the XAML. So let's take a crack at this one real quick. So first of all, I'm pretty sure this is a bug. The thing is, the tab control is new to this library. It did not exist in this library for a long time. The reason is because there's another library called Draggables that was expected to be the useful option if people wanted a style tab control. The problem is Draggables has not been updated in a while and doesn't support a lot of like .NET 5, .NET 6, etc., etc. Okay, so let's start with writing. Let's write a little test, I think. So we're going to go UI tests. Oh, actually, before I get carried away writing a UI test, the last time we ran into a small issue with my XAMLTest library, which is what I use to write UI tests, and I'm wondering, should we do some XAMLTest stuff instead? That kind of sounds fun to me. My stream. XAMLTest stuff it is. Okay. Let's jump in here. Okay, so am I caught up? Yeah, we got all of this. We got all of this stuff set. Okay, so XAMLTest. So for those people who haven't seen XAMLTest before, it is what is powering these tests here. I largely wrote it for building out tests for the material design and XAML library, because the issue is this library is a style and theming library, which unfortunately means it's really hard to write tests, because half the time the bugs are thing doesn't look right, and it's really hard to write good tests over UI objects. You've got the issue of your tests have to run as an STA thread, something with a UI to go with it. And then more importantly, you really don't want to just like fire up the controls and run them that way because you aren't getting the full UI rendering stack. And so you kind of get this, well, it's kind of an okay test, not quite as good. Yeah. So what XAMLTest does is it actually starts a full WPF app shell and then lets you drop in XAML content and run tests against it. But because it's running in a full WPF app, you get all the WPF stuff, which is great. That's how stuff like this is ending up working. So this load XAML method is actually a helper one that just exists in the material design stuff. So I built, on top of XAMLTest, I built a couple extra helper methods into the material design test project that will stand up kind of a default app.xaml with the appropriate, bundled theme and the default styling stuff. It brings in the appropriate needed DLLs to make it all work. Great. And then it'll stand up a default window for you with all of the stuff in it, which is great. That's what you want. And then from there, writing the test becomes easy. Use this called load XAML. It does the whole app spin up, the startup, and gives you a material designy looking window as its shell. And then in this case, we just write the test, which is, hey, let's dump the color zone in. And let's just grab the theme colors out and make sure we got the right theme color. Boom. So these theme colors dive into the app resources to make sure that those get pulled out. And then this just rips through the color zone modes and says, hey, when I set the particular mode, let's make sure it's pulling the right resource brush. Simple, simple, simple. Makes it easy. But it is not a perfect library. And more importantly, there was a couple things that bit me last time that I was both excited and unexcited about. So, for example, if we launch this app right here, if I launch this, so hang on, stop, don't get in the way. If I launch this with debugging, launch with debug, launch with debug, launch with debug. Come on. Thinking. It's not over on a different screen, is it? I assume it's just recompiling the project since I didn't compile it. Come on, let's go. You can do it. You can do it. Come on. Come on, let's go. Launch. Okay. This should fire up. And hopefully, yes. So it is at a breakpoint. Unfortunately, the window is being set to topmost. But you'll note this window here is hung. Okay? And the reason it's hung is because I'm at a breakpoint. If I let it go, oh, I'm probably going to hit it on the next pass here in just a second. Turn the breakpoint off. What XAMLTest actually does is it lets you debug into the app shell. So let's grab one of the samples. So like dialog host, closing with event view model. Sure, let's just bind here. That'll work. And then I assume these are going to be in dialog host tests, closing event counter. Closing event counter. Okay, so this is going to be important. I am going to debug this test here. This test is going to load this user control into a different process, into that other WPF app shell. That window is running in a completely separate process from my test runner, and I'll show that in just a second. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here. Okay. You'll note I have hit this breakpoint. If we look task manager, we should have a XAMLTest. I've got a XAMLTest process running. This is a separate process that's out there. And if I go through and look at, let's see, what window would show it to me? Windows, or actually, we should be able to do it from just the immediate window. So how about process, system, diagnostic dot process. I don't know why this is giving me such problems. Debug Windows. Let's look at, where can we see what we're attached to? Processes. Ahaha, that'll work. So you can see right now, I am in the XAMLTest.exe, not my test host process. So the XAMLTest library, when it starts up that external process, if you are running with the debugger attached to your test host, it will automatically attach that debugger to the XAMLTest project. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool in my book. But the problem is sometimes you don't want that behavior. Sometimes it's nice to pause your test, leave that remote app running so that you can interact with it, click some buttons, play with stuff, maybe attach Snoop, do whatever, right? So one of the things I would like to do on this guy, let's close you. Let's close you before we get too carried away. Let's jump over here because we've got, so I've logged a couple issues of things that I would like to fix. Oh, and there is this one here. I'm trying to test setup here. Oh, I didn't even notice this one. I will go back and look at this. This is somebody else who works on some of the material design options. So I will check that. I must have missed the email when that issue got logged. But this is what the issue I was contemplating fixing. So add option to disable debugger attached. Right now, it just always blindly attaches. If your test harness has a debugger attached, it just blindly attaches the debugger. And I'd like a switch to say, nah, don't do that all the time. Okay, so let's find where that actually is occurring. So I actually know that this was the latest thing that got merged in. So the easy way to find it is going to be look at the pull requests. And we can see the changes for the code here. I think it's inside of app is where a lot of this bit is occurring. Yeah, so debugger is attached. So app.cs, let's go and look at that. Okay. So this XAMLTest project is a little weird because it is both itself a library and a exe. So I abuse it a little bit. We have fun. Okay, first things first. File scope namespace because I can't resist. Okay, use debugger. So this is where we want to toggle it. So this is where it is starting up the remote process and it's building up the process start info object. And in this case, what we want to do is go through and not always attach this. So I think what we want to do is have some sort of, trying to decide. It doesn't make, so I think what I want is something almost like an optional Boolean here. Allow debugger attach. That way there's a way to turn it off. I think that's what I want. Because I'm trying, I want it to make sense for, I don't want it to indicate that it will always attach. And why did I do use debugger? Is this used somewhere else? It is down here. Because this is what actually leverages it. So actually what we're going to do is we're going to change this to be allow debugger attach and. And I think it's as simple as that. The hard part is there's not a great way of being able to test this, which is disappointing. Beyond, I've got an API for it. And this guy down here, allow debugger attach. We'll let that flow through. Okay, so we'll just add that real quick. So create branch, fix, and then this is 64. Okay, stage all changes. Allow disabling, debugger attach. Fixes pound 64. Allows a flag to disable debugger attach. Even when a debugger is attached to the host process. Boom. We'll do that. And then, oh, I gotta just lever. Okay, I have to. Let's just take a moment to appreciate how cool this is. I have a local branch, fix64, that is not pushed. This is local to my system. It hasn't gone anywhere. I drag that onto master, and it immediately gives me the option of, hey, let's go ahead and push this and create a pull request. That's a lot of operations all at once. Now, the only thing I wish. That I don't need to wish. It exists right here on the context menu. Boom. Get cracking. Once again, I applaud you. I applaud you. I don't know if you could make that easier. It pushed the branch, it opened the pull request, and I don't have to think. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And because I only have one remote, unlike the other one when I did it where I have multiple remotes and it had to ask me which one I wanted to push to. In this case, because there's only one, it just made the assumption that it's the one that's there. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Okay. Okay, so this was another one that I couldn't do. So hang on, I kind of want to look at this. So what did I do wrong? gRPC exception. So IApp start remote. This is NUnit. That's fine. I think NUnit, this is the way one would expect it. So when it goes to start the remote, it's being pointed at this app here. So this is so I suspect the issue unavailable, failed to connect to all addresses. This is probably an indication. So I think we can fix this. Well, I don't think we can fix this. What I think is happening is the app that's being started up is crashing on startup for some reason. It could be a number of different things that cause it. But because it's crashing on startup, that is not apparent. And so you end up with, when it tries to go out, because you'll note this setup here is occurring, and it's trying to reach out to the application that it got. Great. Like this is roughly the steps that you would do with XAMLTest. Is you would start an application, and then you would reach out and grab the main window or all the windows and iterate over them. It's whatever. Usually main windows where people start. Should I call application initialize? I didn't understand exactly if this should be called when using start remote. I don't think so. I don't think so. So one, clearly I haven't documented this well enough. Let's come in here, because for example, this is the example that most people should follow, right? I have a test project, this one here. I have a WPF app, which this is a very simplistic WPF app, nothing fancy. and you just call start remote and it does the needful for you. So if we come in here, you shouldn't need to call initialize. I'm actually surprised that that was even a choice. Oh, I guess that is a question. You might need to call it depending on what you need. You might need to call it depending on what you need. So one, this is expected to be used to populate like XAML resources as well as dependent assemblies. So if there is additional assemblies that you need to load, it's a little disappointing that it doesn't automatically just load them. Well, you shouldn't need to necessarily load all the assemblies. If you're launching an app and the app has them referenced, they should automatically exist there. So you shouldn't necessarily need to call it. For example, this works here, right? So let's, proof is in the pudding. Let's run my own test. Okay, my own test fails. That's not a very ringing endorsement. Well then. Okay, my assertion that this just works out the gate is a failure, and I'm now slightly interested in how my CI/CD is passing. Please tell me I run all my tests as part of my build. The tests run. Huh. How? Okay, let's. And apparently my other thing just passed. Let's just check that. It claims all the tests passed. It claims all of the tests just passed. Build test. 632 tests passed. Okay. How many tests does this thing? Now, that sounds like 632 tests. Okay, so it ran them all and they all passed. Okay, well, it's good that it passes there, but then fails on my box? What? That is interesting, to say the least. Okay, so we've got, we've got reproduction for the bug, because this is exactly what is there, and now let's figure out why it's failing. So my assertion on the app is failing to start. So let's actually leverage our new little allow debugger attach false. Let's run a debug. Okay, so the app started. Oh. Okay, so the app launched. I got to here. Oh, interesting. Interesting. So the debugger attach is actually causing the problem. Okay, so maybe this is timing related. Maybe this is timing related. So that just went green. Wait, what? Didn't we? Oh no. This is not good. This is not good. Ah ha ha. So allow debugger attach of true, and debugging results in, and it's specifically, okay. Yeah, so it is crashing in attach, in the Visual Studio attach. Line 40. Why are you not going there? Attach. So you should not fail. But you are. So the message filter indicated the application is busy. Retry later. Okay, well, so this thing's clearly not retrying. Process get process ID. So in C#, if you see get underscore process ID, this is actually what auto properties end up compiling into, or I guess properties in general. So that's this method here. Where is a process ID? Parent local processes, get DTE process ID. So this is a first or default call. Okay, so I think we need to do a couple things here. So the nice part, Chin Undercover, thanks for the follow, I appreciate it. Playing with my XAMLTest library. I guess I never actually even shared a link. Well, let's just fix that real quick. Copy link. Here's a link to the project. There was an issue reported that I thought was not an issue. And, hey, we merged this. Didn't I? Oh, I didn't actually hit the merge button. I should hit the merge button. There was an issue I thought was a non-issue, and it turns out it is a real issue, and now I'm trying to figure out how to fix it. And it appears, squash merge. It appears that this is related to, so is there a stack trace here? There's not a stack trace. But we did see this exact issue occur, and it feels very timing related. Yeah, I'm thinking this issue here. Get attached Visual Studio. So this is something that shouldn't matter. Because this will end up returning. So we know we got past this, because get attached Visual Studio process. If it returns null, you drop out of here. And I'm kind of thinking, so I've got a small little wait class that's already built in that can wait for Boolean conditions to occur. Oh look, file scope namespace. Boom, done. I'm thinking I might just leverage this. It's a very simplistic try, catch, retry. It's not nearly as advanced as something like the poly library for people who are interested. Let's see. Poly, retry, C#, something. Where is it? Boom. This guy. Yeah, for people who are interested in it. Poly is a wonderful library if you're interested in having, implementing like retry, circuit breaker, timeout, bulkhead isolation. They've got a whole bunch. Rate limiting. And actually, they've got some really great samples down here. I thought about taking a dependency on Poly for this library just for this. A lot of people use it for networking related stuff because there's nice built-in helpers for like ASP.NET Core, HTTP client, that kind of fun stuff. But yeah. But I rolled my own for this library just to keep the dependency tree light. And I'm kind of thinking we're going to do something like this. Because I think what I want is a wait for. And we're just going to pause it there. So it wants to take in a lambda. And I could put all of this in a lambda. But I think what I almost want to do is static bool copy, not paste, implementation process application process, and then this guy goes here, this guy goes here, and then this guy goes here, and this is going to want a thingy passed into it, so we'll go with application process. And then I don't know if I want to specify a retry policy, but I do want to do a message. Let's see. Failed to attach Visual Studio to the XAML test host process. Okay, and what is your problem here? Oh, because this wants a task of Boolean. Task. I'm trying to remember, what is the... It does do, so the retry allows for specifying some amount of delay into it. So the minimum number of attempts and then a timeout. If I recall correctly, it will do like 3 tries over 5 seconds or something like that. Let's see. Should retry. What is the default? Oh, the default. Yeah, so retry with a minimum of 3 attempts or for 2 seconds. I think we're actually gonna bump that up. Because I would like it to try a little longer than that, knowing how much effort goes into it. So retry will be a new retry. And we're going to say, I want you to try at least 5 times with a time span of 15 seconds. Retry does not have a param. Oh, I'm missing a closing paren. And then this should become an async. I'm a little surprised I didn't give myself a synchronous overload. Every single one of these is async. Okay. I guess having this be async is not that bad of a thing. Let's see. Async. Because it does need to do a task.delay in order to do the retry. So that's not bad. And then return. There. I think that's better. Can implicitly convert. Oh, I actually want the bool back out in this case. Oh, interesting. Okay, so this may not necessarily be what I want, because this will end up throwing a timeout exception. What does the call? There's only one caller of this. The caller is ignoring the return anyway. Okay, so this bool is worthless. So we're just gonna, simple solution, get rid of the bool. And then we don't need the return, and that makes life a lot easier. Okay, it's either gonna work or it's gonna throw. Which is probably better for all parties concerned. Okay. And I think this might be better. Error list. File is locked. This is one of the other things, is occasionally this library can get itself stuck where it gets it running. Now the XAMLTest thing does technically have a, we'll call it a heartbeat. So I can show that real quick. Where is your heartbeat? There is, where is that timer? There's a timer that ticks, and if it doesn't hear back in so much time, it kills it. XAMLTest app. Oh, the test host is probably keeping it alive, isn't it? Sort by name. I guess T is a little further down, isn't it? Huh? Am I the only one missing it? Is it buried in here somewhere? Start with this. Kill that one. Cut down the Visual Studio process I have to look at by 1. And I bet you it is... Yeah. There you are. Found you. Okay. Try this again. Let's give this guy another shot. I'm going to update this. There. Stream info updated. Since XAMLTest is cool. Okay, so now you should run your test. Huh? And then work magically. Okay, and then debug. What are you squawking about now? Oh, you're not awaited. That is a problem. Sweet. Oh, I just absolutely love being able to attack. So in case it wasn't obvious what that was. So you'll note this app test real quick. Right? This is inside of my test project. This test app inside of the main window, inside of his constructor. This is going to get started as a separate process. I can debug into my other app. This is kind of cool. I would love to know how to do a debugger attached for Writer as well. So if anyone has insight into what that would look like, that would be cool. That is so slick. So slick. Okay, cool. Cool. Okay, so that fixes that with debug attached. And then, so I think that was probably the issue, is the debugger was causing things to slow down and die, and it was timing related. I think that is probably the answer, is that little retry loop in there. Because now if it fails to attach, you'll get a much better exception. The other thing, let me just look here. Is the log message one. It may be worth adding something to that. And I am wondering if this API should be improved. It's because this log message just, like, it is chatty. And it's designed to be chatty. It's basically, if you set this delegate, you're going to get the verbose logs just coming back at you. And I intentionally did them as a callback delegate to make them, quote unquote, easy. But I'm wondering if that's not... I'm wondering if people would prefer to pass in something like an iLogger instead. I don't know. I did it this way. That way I was pretty agnostic of your testing framework. And you could just pass a delegate, and in your delegate, you call your logging framework. Well, let's give this a shot. Let's pull this up. Okay, so this is actually a great example here too. So you will note we were working on the fix for issue 64. That PR has merged into master, but I did all of my work on this other branch. Now, there's a couple ways I could go about doing this. The long way of doing it is you stash, switch branches, create a new branch, fix 65, right? And then you pop, and then you work. The long way. That works. Okay, let's go back. And we'll do this the hard way too. So if I whack this, boom, 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 boom. All right, so that's the long way of doing it. The short way of doing it is you right click, create branch, fix 65. Boom. See? Get Kraken makes a lot of things go quicker. A lot of things go quicker. So it automatically jumped me. So in Get Kraken, when you create a new branch, if it's not apparent, it automatically tries to switch you to that branch. Just generally what you want. There's a handful of times where it's annoying, but most of the time that's exactly what you want. Okay, so then we check. We always review our work. We come down here. We flatten this so that it was a little more readable. We added in a wait with a retry and made a local function. We flattened up the catch block. Not a big deal either way. Sure, that looks great. The wait class. This is something also that's worth noting. So you'll note I switched this to a file scope namespace. In general, newer C# code should probably use file scope namespaces. In this case, if you have whitespace turned on, switching to a file scope namespace is obnoxious. So if you are making these changes, turn on ignore whitespace. Let's see. Justin Bieber. Hi, are you running as a separate process? Don't you want to run in a subdomain? I think you mean as a child process, if I am understanding correctly. So the answer is yes-ish, and I kind of am, and kind of not. So inside of Windows, let's see if I can find a quick thing. Windows process jobs. There is this, yeah, this ugly guy here. Within Windows, the way you would typically register up so that your process dies when the parent process dies is with a job. And you can do this in C#. It's not cross-plat. This is a Windows-specific thing. But it does mean that when you get terminated, you can close as well. And I think, let me look real quick. I think I actually have a little bit of sample code for this, but I need to look, because I also have a bunch of stuff in here that is not public, so we're just going to be a little patient. Gotta just scan. Wish there was a search function in here. Output benchmarks. Maybe I don't have it. I'm old enough now that I think I'm past where I expected to find it. Yeah, I don't see it. There is some code that I have. It's based on an old code project thing that will actually do these nested jobs in C# for you to terminate it. It does involve a little pinvoke stuff. If your program crashes, won't it kill the program that spawned it? If the child crashes, it won't kill the parent process. If the parent crashes, if the parent crashes and you're attached with a job, it will kill the children. Normally what happens is when the parent terminates, you may or may not go down depending on how your process starts. If you just do a blind process.start, it won't necessarily terminate. Thanks for showing the white space setting for the diff. I was just thinking about reverting that namespace change on a PR to reduce noise for the reviewer. Yeah, so, okay. Point of contention. This is a Kevinism. I personally believe that if I have to touch a file, I should clean it up. I subscribe to the Boy Scout principle that says you always leave the code cleaner than when you found it. However, there is a alternate school of thought that says make as little changes as possible and only do like refactoring cleanup as separate PRs. Both sides have their pros and cons. So on the side of the make changes as small as possible and only do refactoring as cleanup in other PRs, that I think is very good in principle. And as long as your team is allocated time to do cleanup, I think that works. The problem that I see is oftentimes in processes, that time never happens. And if that cleanup is never occurring, you're never actually making progress towards making your code cleaner. So if you swing the pendulum the other direction on the Boy Scout principle, you should probably not just change everything to file scope namespace willy-nilly, because at a bare minimum, it's going to bloat your PR size. People should know to turn off white space when they're doing code reviews. This is one of those things that I usually assume people know, but it's not always apparent. Git Kraken makes it easy. Most diff tools, I think all, I'm hesitant to say all, but I think most, if not all, have a toggle white space option. I delete other people's useless comments. That's my good deed when viewing code. Oh, I love it. I love it. I have something interesting going on here. I do love it. So, okay, small tangent. On the note of code comments, I generally find that deleting comments, a lot of people, I'll back up. Comments are very useful when you're documenting what the code or the why behind the code, because the code usually tells you the what. Usually. There are times where the what is not always apparent, because you can write some really unreadable code at times. So there, just last week, I showed some code to a colleague and he looked at me, he's like, I get it. I understand why you did it. You need to write some comments, because if I saw that, I would be fixing it. I was like, good point. Thank you. So I did write some comments, because there are times where the what may not be obvious. There's some ways to subtly slip stuff in. But in general, the what is not necessarily something we're documenting. The why, however, is very important, because code can very rarely tell you the why. And in this case, sorry, switching back to my diff. In this case, this was an allowed debugging attach. I want the file scope namespace. I don't want this line, so I can just right click and discard. And you'll note as soon as I discard, it automatically indented this thing, and I don't want that. So edit, whoop, save, close, and whoop, go back. Show me that file again. The test one. So now I should just have the file scope namespace. Great. And you'll note it has to kind of guess. Comments should be reserved for business logic, business decisions, in my opinion. Yeah, in general, I would argue that is oftentimes the why for why things were done. Like, we did code this way because of X. And sometimes they can be as simple, like I've seen people put in like links to your issue tracker, which is okay-ish, except for if your issue tracker ever changes, you can kind of get hosed, or if the issue gets edited. So I usually kind of like a link to an issue or a user story is great, but I always get a little twitchy if that's the only bit of the comment, because in most issue tracking things, it's easy to edit an issue or delete an issue or switch issue trackers. And then it's like, well, now that comment's just even more meaningless than when it was before. Okay, so that is fine. That is fine. Let me just make sure I didn't break anything. Oh, I did break something. Start remote would then no longer be synchronous call. It would be async. Ooh. Ooh. That's a potentially scary thing. think I like the idea of making this async. The vast majority of this library is async. Because most of the calls that you make, like create window with content, what that ends up doing is sending a request from your test host into your WPF app shell, creating a window, and then coming back to you. And there's that communication runs over gRPC with named pipes. So it's just named pipe. It's basically network communication, but local, back and forth between them, which is great, but it does make everything async. And I'm wondering if this should be, like, how bad is it if I just do this? Like, that's a major breaking change. Whoo boy, whoo boy. And the only reason it would need to be async is for this. So the other option is I could pull this out and make an overload. That might not be a bad idea. Leave these other ones synchronous. Yeah, it may be in the interest of not breaking that compat. I break this in. Yeah, I think in the interest of not breaking backwards compatibility, Wow, what do you do here? Okay, so because if I make this an asynchronous method, that's changing the return type. Changing the return type is very much a breaking change. And I kind of go, so why this matters? Why this matters? Semver. So on most of my libraries, including XAMLTest, I generally subscribe to the principle that until I hit a 1.0 release, I don't bother to follow semantic versioning. But, oh, I don't have a NuGet link. I should fix that. But once you hit a 1.0 release, which is what I am now at, now you should follow semantic versioning. So I usually reserve everything below 1.0 is I can do what I want, break APIs. I'm not going to follow Semver, like the library is an active getting built thingy. Yeah, so this should be considered alpha releases and all APIs are subject to change without notice. 1.0, I now follow semantic versioning. So if I break the API, and there's binary backwards compatibility and source backwards compatibility. Binary is really difficult. I subscribe to source backwards compatibility. So this means by adding this in, this is a backwards compatible change from source, because anybody who didn't bother to specify it before would be getting the same behavior that they were getting previously. Fine, great, not a big deal. I think what I almost want to do is something like public static iapp start with the debug. Oh, you know what we could do? Because the only reason this matters is because if I don't pass the debug flag to myself, because all this is doing is this API so this method exists inside of the XAMLTest project. The XAMLTest project is itself a WPF app. So when you invoke this method, what it's doing is it's starting a new process pointed at itself. So it literally grabs itself and then executes on itself. That's all it's doing. But when it starts up, it has the ability to pass itself some arguments, and this is how we get the separate process going, and how I can make some assumptions about how my client and server are working, because the same library is also the app shell that gets started up. I can be pretty confident that I don't have two versions. Like everything's always going to be the same version, and I can change that the gRPC protocol, and I don't have to worry about like back compat, because whatever assembly you use to start the thing is the same assembly that started, so it's always going to have the same one. Or it's going to be really hard to not get the same one. But I pass it the debug switch here. And all this debug switch does, so if we go and look, where is the startup? It's like program CS here. So if we look here, this is using system command line for those who care, and for anybody who watched last week's stream. And I should probably update this for latest system command line, but I don't think any of these things have largely changed. This guy here is processing the arguments. It's just doing a parse. And this is all being done just as an easy way of processing this args array. I could have been a little less picky about using system command line because the only invoker of this should be me. Oh, and there's the heartbeat timer. Yeah, that was the thing I was looking for. The thing that kills itself. And with this debug switch here being set, what ends up happening is when that is set, it will actually sit, when it starts up, it'll sit and spin waiting for a debugger to attach, which is great. It just, is the debugger attached? Sleep. Is the debugger attached? Sleep. And it'll just sit there and wait for a debugger to show up. And this guy, this heartbeat check will just come in here and go, hey, you know, is my parent process alive? If it is, I stay running. If my parent process terminates, it dies. So this is the kind of the reverse of a job. And the other thing to know about those process jobs is there's only one level of hierarchy. You can't have a child nested under a child. And the other drawback is Visual Studio often wants to leave its test process running. It's a long-running process. So you can kind of run into this fun situation where XAMLTest stays running because Visual Studio kept the test host running, and so the heartbeat never actually kills itself. So yeah, that's fun. That can be a little bit annoying. I am still trying to decide how to handle this API, because this method does need to be async. The moment I want to do retry and waiting and that kind of thing, it definitely needs to be async. I think what I want to do is a separate method to avoid breaking back compat. I think I want a separate method that does all of this. Oh, technically this method here, or this parameter here, isn't in the 1.0 release. This is new. I wonder if this guy here makes for a good compelling case. Okay, so what's the API that I want? Public static async task of IApp start with debugger. Is that what I want? Because if you don't want the debugger, you can kind of ignore this altogether. And then this guy, so that brings, this is huge duplication for the moment. Don't panic, we're gonna fix it. But now this is all happy. And the only thing it's unhappy about is it wants these same parameters. Okay, I think this is gonna look a little better. I think. Okay, so if this guy works like this, then rather than there being a Boolean parameter for toggling this thing on and off, we can go back to the original code that I had without the toggle. However, I then want to eliminate it from this altogether. You are no longer a thing. You go back down to here. This goes away. this goes away. This goes away. Okay. So start remote. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so now the question is, I don't like all of this useless duplication. So the big difference are these lines here and this line here. So how can I break this up? I think what we do is we go with something about like this, I think. Start remote. This becomes private. Yeah, because I think what we can do, and these things all become non-optional because optional is not going to be a thing here. This is, you're gonna, if you're calling, all of these guys are going to call this one, and how you expose it is up to you. Bool, allow, debugger, attach. Right, that's what it was called a second ago, right? Let me look. Yeah, allow debugger attach. Boom. Great. So we are going to have you and allow debugger attach, which that goes back into here, which is great. That goes into there, that goes into there. And then we cheat, blatantly cheat. So this method here is async. And this becomes await, start remote, remote app, XAMLTest path, log message, and true. Those all go like that. And then we're going to do an overload that looks kind of like this here. And because doing the T app here like this is just used as a shorthand for getting access to the location. And we could avoid that duplication too if we wanted. This needs to be start with debugger, start with debugger, start with debugger, and then this becomes location, XAML path. What is your problem here? What is cannot implicitly convert from task. Oh. Async task. There. Wait. Boom, boom, boom. Builds that out and away we go. Okay. So both of those guys go there. Now, because we know this is passing true, these things need to be async. This is where we do something bad. This is where we do something bad. And this is probably a good argument for, wow, did you just, that's pretty close. Oh, it guessed itself. We should rename this to start remote. Because I don't want to accidentally land on the wrong overload because I'm an idiot. And then this needs to be false. And we do dot result. Now, For those people who watched my stream weeks ago about the TPL, I believe I said dot result you should use almost never, ever, 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 or something about like that. However, this is actually okay here. Currently actually okay. So it is only okay because in the case of a false, we will never hit an await. And an asynchronous method in C# does not shell out and does not go asynchronous until it hits the first await. And we know that by passing a false, we're guaranteed to never hit inside of, or use debugger is guaranteed to be false, which means we will never hit an await inside of here. This feels a little risky because future Kevin's an idiot and will probably forget about this stream and will probably need to be reminded of it. Little risky, but should be fine. Okay, now I have to write some tests because this is something that definitely needs to be tested. So first of all, does it compile? Step 1. And I've got a nullable warning in here too. What did I do wrong here? What's possibly null? Converting null literal line 47 to possibly non. Are you trying to insist that VS process could be null? Because no, it can't be. No, that is not possible to be null. Why would you think that that's possible to be null? Okay, 46, so it's still flagging, so I am missing something here. Character 52, where is character 52? Where is my character counter? There it is. Character, you guys probably can't see it. Character counter is right about there, behind my chair. 52. So it's flagging line 47, character 52 to line 51, character 95. Oh, no, what it's flagging is this is non-nullable. And I'm doing a first or default, which could return a null. That makes a little more sense. That makes a little more sense. I'm surprised I didn't get squiggles. There. Okay. Warning fixed. And we check it for null, so that makes perfect sense. Okay, so we would like to write some app tests, though, because I want to verify that this actually works. So test method, public async task. Let's see. So we are testing app. And let's do with this. Let's see. So on start with debugger. Launches with debug flag. So here's the fun part, right? So we have to try and test this a little bit, and it's really hard to write an automated test that tests this because Visual Studio isn't going to be running on like the GitHub Actions runner. That's not a thing that's going to be there. However, what I can test is this little argument list. This guy here. I'm pretty sure we can do it. So let's do one of these guys. So if I do this, right, I should be able to go app, and then it's the easiest way to grab that. think we could actually probably just grab it in the test app itself. So we could just have main window expose it for me. Hey, look, boom, file scope namespace. I think what we do here, so we have this guy just contain, because this is just using test app window, and I think one of the other tests was already leveraging that. Yeah, getting the title. So I don't really want to change the title of the window. What we could do, though, is we could set its tag property. And I think if we do environment, I'm pretty sure this thing contains the... It's the command line for this process. I believe this will contain all of the stuff. But let's test and find out. Let's confirm it. So this needs to be start with debugger. And then this needs to be await. That looks a little funny. Await using var app equals await app start with debugger. Could be worse. Okay. And then I want to do something like app.get main window. Var window. And then I want to do window get tag. I think I can do this. No. Var tag. I'm trying to remember what is the return of this object? Probably. Get main window. So how about assert not is not null window. Then that works there. And then assert are equal debug tag. I think this will work. I don't think it's going to be equal to this. I think this is going to need to be more like it contains, but I think this works. But we're going to launch this test with debugging. And since we said start with debugger, we should hit my breakpoint in the main window on the other app because of awesome debugging skills. You see test host fires up, XAMLTest, and we attach to it. Oh, mwah, mwah. Magic occurs. Sweet. Okay, so this shows the entire invocation of what was used to start this. So root host, application path, -- debug. Awesome. Awesome. I like it. 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 Okay. So I think what's important for my purposes, for the purposes of this test. Oh, we didn't actually see. I want to make sure I'm able to read that tag back. Debug. Boom. Tag. Look at that. Boom. Okay, so I think we're just going to do a contains on it. So assert is true. Tag to string because it's an object. Contains -- debug. Boom. That should be fine. I think assert true is hip to nullable boolean. Yeah, sweet. So it'll fail on null and it'll fail on contains. Oh, I'm just realizing if I launch this without a debugger attached, this thing fails, doesn't it? Yeah. So, and I say that it fails because there's still, so even though we pass through a start with debugger and start with debugger passes through a true, that true is going to end up being a false because no debugger is attached. Because if this is false, this is the equivalent of not doing any attachment. So I think what I have to do, I hate doing this, but I don't know of a cleaner way to do this. Because normally, assert inconclusive. This test must be run with a debugger attached. So if I run this, I should get inconclusive. And if I debug it, I should be able to see it work. I'm not sure how I feel about that. But I'm also not sure I can do much better. Okay, so test run finished. What did you do exactly? Assert true. Oh, return. Run test. Oh, if debugger is not attached. Okay. Boolean logic is hard. Will inconclusive tests still mark the pipeline run as failed? Ah, no. No, they will not. Which is a blessing and a curse. They will show up as like warning level. So you will see like the little yellow thing saying, hey, this one didn't run. So yellow on run, green on debug. And it's worth noting that debug in this case doesn't mean the debug configuration. It means with debugger attached. Okay. Well, that worked with what I wanted. I'm trying to think if there's any other way I can write a good test for this. Let's just run the whole suite of tests through here, because I just want to make sure that you'll see some windows flash as these tests go, because they do a bunch of window creations. Okay, so I at least didn't break the rest of the app class. Okay, now we got to go back and really check. Okay, so that goes there. That was just a cleanup there. Nullable warning fix there. The test. See, app.xaml. I'm going to discard that. It's a good formatting change. It's a good formatting change. I don't need either of those. This one I'm going to keep. Okay. Now we've got a little bit larger setup. Let's see. Fix issue with app startup failing. Attempted fix for, and then I want the issue number. So it's hard to say that this is the exact fix, but we did see a failure that was similar. So I'll move this so my big head isn't in the way. We did see a failure that was similar, so it's potentially related. This may have been due to a timing issue with the latest VS Debugger support. This feature has been moved to a new app.start with debugger method. And now supports retry, which likely will help, we think. So commit, push. Oh, wait. We don't have to push. We don't have to push. Oh, that is so nice. So nice. I actually like the right click. I like the right click. Let's see. Create pull request. And I'm not going to mark this as fixes the issue, but I think I am going to go back and leave a comment on this. questions. First, which version of the library are you using? If it was one of the, what was my NuGet version? I gotta add it. I gotta add a NuGet.org link. XAMLTest. If it was one of the, oh, I haven't actually hit 1.0 yet. I thought I released 1.0. I haven't hit 1.0. These are preview builds. Of the early 1.0 preview builds, it's possible the failure was due to a VS Debugger feature failure. I have attempted a fix in pull request number in pound 67. You could test. Let's see. I'm trying to remember. Does this thing just kick nightlies all the time, or how does it do it? Can't remember if this thing just always pushes NuGets. It does. So it'll push a NuGet every time. Every time after a merge. Great. Fast. You could test. Let's see. I don't know exactly which one it is. Any build. Let's see here. You could test any build after actually it's important to say is fixed. That would be great. Cool. It is worth noting, I had initially built this library to not be a full UI testing library and had designed it to be testing around like UI components and styles and themes. But it feels a little more useful than that. So it feels a little nicer. I like it a little better. So we will see. Okay, so while that guy thinks about what he's doing, we need to clean some stuff up here. So specifically, this README. We need a NuGet badge. Blah blah blah. Where is the? I thought there was a nice little NuGet badge thingy right on here. Am I making that up? Okay, I apparently am making that up. So let's just go steal one. Boom, boom, boom. Material design. This thing has a nice NuGet badge. So I want to just look at whatever the heck I did here. I did do something. Raw. Let's see. Oh, I'm just going through IMG shields is how we're doing it. We can grab this. And we can come back over to here. And then we slap this guy in. Now, important thing to note. This guy here needs to be XAMLTest. And then NuGet. Trying to think. This is NuGet themes. And then this should be XAMLTest. I believe is the right URL. We just drop this off. Oh, that will take me where I want to go. And preview. Let's see. I'm trying to decide what this text should be. I think we just do NuGet and drop this off and just let that be NuGet as well. I think that's probably just fine. Yeah. Though I'm also thinking that I don't like the flat style. I think if I just turn that off, the default looks prettier. Yeah, that's a little better. Is it different? Slightly. It has the rounded corners. Okay, we'll go over rounded corners. Rounded corners are pretty. Okay, so there's that. There's that. That works. That works. That works. Let's see here. This extra set of doohickeys, is it needed? Oh, it is if I want that whole thing to be a link. But won't this work without that? It'll just take me to there. Oh, that's why I did that. That was smart of me. Okay, so we put that back. Doesn't that mean this is a... Yeah, that's... Okay. Okay, we're fixing that too while we're in here. So we'll make this a link actually over to the latest build. So let's grab that. Try to decide. Yeah, we'll just do this. This is probably a reasonable link. Let's test it. Middle click. Okay, that works. Let's see. I'm going to cheater mode this thing in. I think. Create a new branch. About update readme. Post change. Boom, boom, boom. Create pull request. Squash merge. Squash merge. Cool. So that goes in. Oh, this thing's... It's annoying. That is really annoying. Okay, so for people who didn't notice that, that was the period hotkey. On GitHub, you can also change the .com to .dev to get the same result. And what I would like to do is come into here. Has to ignore readme.md. Hello, why did that trigger then? This feature is way too hidden. The period, I can agree. It is one of the coolest things ever. Is you can literally get VS in a browser running against a repo. And as you saw with like full pull requests and all of that, you can run extensions. However, the extensions that you get are limited to extensions that don't require any sort of background compute. So things like OmniSharp, you cannot run because OmniSharp requires a server running for like C# stuff. But basic extensions that just do like syntax highlighting, you can get working. GetLens, you can get working. So some of the theming stuff and those types of stuff will work for you. And you'll note it also remembers your settings and whatnot because it's just that level of cool. Boom. Did that reload all my extensions? Yay! Boom, boom, boom. I'm a little confused as to why this paths to ignore. Oh, it's because it's a pull request. This paths to ignore. If I recall correctly, this is distinct from code spaces, so no running your app, right? Correct. Yes. And last I heard, they were looking at ways of kind of bridging those two, because right now you kind of have a one or the other option, and they were wanting to have, they being GitHub, were wanting to have some sort of like way that you could advance from this into the next one. So, you know, get started with this. If you like it, it's going well. Hey, let's go ahead and add in a little bit more. Let's get in some code spaces. Because once you bring in code spaces, now you're paying for the compute. So now we can do more, which is pretty slick. I'm pretty sure what I want to do is this here. I'm pretty sure that's what I want. So that it ignores the paths on both the push and that, but let's just confirm that. GitHub Actions documentation. The GitHub Actions docs are actually quite good. Quite good. Let's see. Triggers. Events that trigger a workflow. Let's go syntax, I think might be a better thing. Because what I'm really looking for is where... Yeah, on pull request, because that's what I've got, right? I've got a on pull request. Okay. Including branches, excluding branches. On push. Does it not have... Okay, so if you define both branches ignore, and paths, the workflow will only run when all of those things. And paths, I believe, are what we were specifying, right? Because we were saying paths ignore. Paths ignore. Got it. So yeah, so that is what I want, is that guy to tell it stop it. Let's see, including skipping builds for markdown. I guess readme or whatnot probably would have been cleaner. So your changes will be committed and immediately pushed to the updated readme branch on GitHub. So because there is no local fork, I'm basically editing out on my remote fork. Committing is the same as commit push from a functional perspective. Now, what does this do here? I would hope that it would cancel the existing action and then trigger the next one, but well, clearly it didn't. It queued another one. I told you very explicitly to ignore this. Grumble, grumble, grumble. Why are you still running against it? readme.md. I'm not stupid, right? Like, that is legitimately... I don't have a file name problem here. readme.md. I mean, it's valid syntax. Paths ignore. If any paths do not, will only run the push events that include at least one file outside the docs directory. You can do the paths with a bang, which is fine. Oh, is it that the problem? Is it legitimately a YAML problem? YAML indentation, question mark. Anyone who has done YAML work should be familiar with this workflow of queue it about 80 million times. Okay, so we're gonna, that one I want to leave going. You, I just want to cancel, because you're meaningless. And then you, triggered via pull request 16 seconds ago. I said no. Paths ignore. Am I stupid? That was a rhetorical question, by the way. Oh, I wonder if I can't exclude it because it is a merge requirement into my branch. I bet you that's the kicker. Because I have a requirement that says that Yeah, because I have a check that requires it to pass before it merges. Okay, rerun all jobs. Yes, rerun. I bet you that's the kicker, is there's not a clean way to exclude on a PR. I guess I should actually cancel this and push this in. That unfortunately makes sense, and I don't know the best solution. I guess I'm now on 4 commits to add a badge to my README. That's probably overkill. That should kick off one more. You should run and you should finish. You should now do a bunch more work. Okay, so we will get... Yeah. So I think that is the kicker, is when you have a merge requirement. So here, and I can show you what I'm talking about. Under the settings, under the branches, I have this branch protection rule set. And this requires status checks to pass before these things can merge. And because I have a status check requirement, I don't know how to tell it to exclude. Hey, Xuchi? I apologize if I butchered that. Thanks for the follow. Appreciate it. How's it going? Play a little annoyed at my GitHub actions. But been playing with a library. Hey, I credit the Mountain Dew. With how late it is, I think it was probably half guess that got me there. But no, I've been working on it, my XAMLTest library, which is a fun little library for testing C# WPF UI stuff. I think we fixed the bug. The only other thing that at some point I want to do, I wrote this thing about document query syntax. Here. Reset, move up. Okay. I'll quickly talk through this, but I don't know how much longer my stream's going to go because my Mountain Dew is empty and my energy is waning. But, so the part that gets me, or the part that has bitten me many times over. Yeah, fire a question away. I definitely don't mind questions at all. I often rabbit trail. The get element and get property have some somewhat advanced syntax that you can query on, and it's kind of a pain. So I was going to look at doing something fancy with a formatable string, perhaps. Because this one here says find the element that has the name my text block, and this one here says find the first element that has the type of text block, which is kind of cool. Let's see, for this code to work, system CLS looks like a function of some kind. I was also contemplating expanding on this get element because this feels like something that could easily be get element of T and have it automatically populate the query for me. So rather than typing this, feels like that should also be valid. And then just have it infer that what I mean is a query by that. The other thing I also contemplated is something rather than being like this, something that's more along the lines of like query of type, and you know, something like this where there's an overload that takes in some sort of query object that then you can build up. So of type text blocks, then, and you know, just start chaining things together. I don't know if that makes it more readable, slightly more discoverable perhaps. Not real sure. Not real sure. The part of the issue is I can't remember my own magical query syntax that I wrote. And if the author can't remember it, I'm pretty sure nothing is going to help. And I wrote on my issue that I need to document it because I'm tired of trying to remember where in the code it is to go and find it. However, I think it would be better to just make the code a little bit more intuitive so that I don't have to go and look it up every time. Because clearly I can't remember it, which means it's not intuitive. What programming language is that, Ekjuchi? It's a C-based or similar language. I can tell that much. Okay, so pull request. This guy should be clear now. C++. Okay. So in order to get that code to work, because I assume the intent is to just clear the system terminal. I assume that is what is intended. And that is, well, I don't do a lot of C++, so I probably have to look some of this up, but I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that it's this guy here. He said right after C out to clear it. Okay. Not horribly surprised. System CMD. String copy into there. So yeah, so this thing, okay. Just kind of looking at the example. So if let me just open this up real quick. If I go here and I open up a regular command prompt, nothing fancy. So like their example here where they're firing the system command off and they're passing it the string dir. The dir command is just the directory listing. And so system CLS, I assume, would do the same as typing CLS at the command prompt, though it's a little more common to type it lowercase rather than all caps. To clear it out, I'm guessing let's see what the code to work. So is it failing to clear your output for what you have there? Because what I would expect you to do is something where it's like C out and then dump some text out to the screen, followed up by system CLS would then leave your terminal in an empty state. So ballparking. Again, I don't necessarily have the tooling installed, and it's been a while since I've done C++. But I would imagine something like this would be what you're looking for. We'll start with fixing the quotes because that's ugly. All right, so we'll call this first. We'll do second, and then I assume system CLS clears it. Let me just double check. They were copying it. So this small example here, I don't have the API up for it here. The fact that it takes in, yeah, the current date is there. Standard lib.h is what that means, and for what. So I would assume. Oh no, you're fine. I assume what is probably being, and again, without, I'm I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that this is some sort of school assignment or similar. But a program similar to this, I would imagine what you would see when you run it is just the word second, because it would write first out initially. This would call the CLS command, which would clear your terminal. And then this would get written out as well. The other thing that's worth noting, CLS is a Windows-based command. So if you are inside of a different operating system, I don't think CLS works. The Linuxy equivalent would just be clear. And that does depend a little bit on the terminal. So I do enough command line stuff. Some terminals behave a little weird. Some of them, when you type clear, all it does is press the enter key for however height your terminal is. And so it pushes the content off the top rather than actually legitimately clearing it. So using Windows. So yeah, so I would expect something like this would give you what you're looking for. At least from what I see, I don't see any reason why that code would work. Does that kind of answer the question? So the intent would be that you would use this function at any point you wanted to clear what was previously written to console out, which is what cout stands for, I believe. It's been a little while since I've done C++, so apparently VS Code even knows that it's... yes, I understand. Cool. Sweet. Feel free to drop in anytime I'm streaming with questions. I don't mind rabbit trailing and answering questions for people. But like I said, I think I am running out of steam and tiredness. I'm out of Mountain Dew, and it's already post 11. So with that, I think I'm going to say happy coding. Thank you for everyone who came and hang out. Appreciate the questions. Always like the interaction. I will see everyone next time.